The very first utterance of Spinoza, in the very first of his published works, The Improvement of the Understanding, or the Treatise on the Emendation of the Intellect, starts with kind of pessimist's delight. Spinoza was not a pessimist per se, although, in some ways you could interpret much of his work in that way. He wasn't a pessimist because he found something else other than just the normal crap that we find in life. So he starts by saying, after experience had taught me the hollowness and futility of everything that is ordinarily encountered in daily life. So he doesn't mix his words. He uses the word everything. He'd found satisfaction in nothing. And you have to remember that Spinoza's family was quite wealthy, so he will have had access to all the goodies that all of us go chasing after. They would have had access to fine clothes, fine property, no doubt, fine everything, and a social environment. They were part of the Amsterdam Jewish community. Everything was there for your average person to brag about. But Spinoza found all of it unsatisfactory. Well, I think Spinoza was just being honest where most people are dishonest. So, here's a bit of an insight into Spinoza that we don't normally get, because most of his writings are quite impersonal. But this first writing of his, The Improvement of the Understanding, he gives a little bit away at the beginning in terms of his own efforts and troubles and disappointments and so on. So, why did he say that everything, not just some things, but everything encountered in ordinary life was hollow and futile? Well, obviously, because it is. It's just that most people can't accept that. They've got so much invested in their holidays, their family, their property, their money, their notoriety, whatever it is. They've got so much invested in it, they just cannot say it's crap. Now, it's very rare that you'll meet someone who's invested in something and will come back and say, well, I spent 3 years doing this and actually it was shite. I once knew someone, a quite sort of almost embarrassingly honest person, who went on holiday with his wife, the dream vacation. They got there, they hated it, they just got the next flight back. Now, what would most people do? They say, well, we've saved and scrimped for this for the last year, and even though it's shite, we're going to enjoy it. It's Gurdjieff's red peppers. The guy who buys the huge, big, red fruit doesn't realize it's a pepper. And because he's bought it, he eats it, even though it's burning his mouth out. And Gurdjieff could easily be talking about Beelzebub's tails there, but that's another story. Anyway, so not most, according to Spinoza, everything in ordinary life is shite. Not his words, but, that's what he's saying. And we can't admit that, and because we can't admit it, then we can't open up the possibility of finding or seeking something else. And so, he says about 3 kinds of seeking that people normally get involved in. The first of which is pleasure. He says, or sensual pleasure, he says, but after the enjoyment of this pleasure, there ensues a profound depression. Again, not mixing his words, he could have said, some disappointment or something. But no, he's saying a profound depression. Now, 2 days ago now, myself and my wife went out for lunch. Just an ordinary place, but it turned out to be a really, really good lunch. And the wine comes free. I mean, wine's very cheap in Portugal. The wine comes free, so we left this place with a belly full of good food and wine. And we both enjoyed it enormously, and we looked at each other and we just said, we know what's coming, don't we? Yes, of course we did. What would be coming would be the profound depression, which is why people who get drunk, they get the sense of being liberated from their normal unhappy self, and they get some pleasure, but you know what's coming afterwards. There's a physical hangover, but also there's a psychological hangover. And the only way to address it is to have even more alcohol. Anyway, so passive pleasures are a roller coaster. We go chasing after something. Maybe it's, we've saved for 5 years to buy a new automobile, new car. And we get it and we sit in it, and for the first day or so it brings us some pleasure, but afterwards it's sort of like, what the fucking hell did I do that for? Why did I save for 5 years to buy this thing that's given me 1 day's pleasure? Or maybe it's a week, but even so, at some point you'll get used to it, and you will get to the point where you need some bigger kick to give you a pleasure. So it's a roller coaster. Now, there is one thing that isn't a roller coaster, but I'll get to that in a moment. So, if you're happy with the roller coaster, then that's the way to go. And that is the way most people live their lives, on the roller coaster. And of course, the roller coaster is a kind of zero sum. For every up, there's a down. So at the end of it all, you've gone exactly nowhere. Which is why many people who get older actually grow embittered as they get older, because they realize it was all futile and hollow, as Spinoza would say. So the other pleasures, apart from sensual pleasure that Spinoza contemplates, are fame and wealth. The problem with fame, as he says, is that it has a very big downside. The downside is, and to quote him, "To attain it we must conduct our lives to suit other men, avoiding what the masses avoid and seeking what the masses seek." You should always have some compassion or something for people who are famous. They live their life in a goldfish bowl. Look at Prince Andrew is the most recent one, I guess. God alone knows what he got up to with Epstein, but even if he didn't do anything, he can't be seen to be in the least way human. Well, not that that's being human, but he can't be seen to be the least bit vulnerable. He has to put on this face of being a totally moral, upright, straight person, which of course nobody is. And if there's a chink in that anywhere, then he suffers accordingly, as he is doing. So to attain fame, we must conduct our lives to suit other men, avoiding what the masses avoid and seeking what the masses seek. And both fame and the striving for wealth have the possibility that you don't attain them. So, again, to quote Spinoza, "But if it should come about that our hopes are disappointed, there ensues a profound depression." Poor old Spinoza, he's probably talking from personal experience here about the profound depression. A few years ago I knew someone who was a struggling musician, and he hadn't made it. He'd put his life's effort into trying to achieve some level of fame. It was fame he wanted more than the wealth, and he was totally fucked up. He was in a bad way because he put all this effort in and it had gone nowhere. And actually, to make matters worse, he got a cousin or someone who had achieved fame, And so that kind of rubbed the salt into the wound for him. But he was in a very bad way. I mean, suicidal. So, the bottom line in all of this is that unless a person becomes profoundly disappointed with all the usual trappings of life, there's no possibility for finding a real pleasure. Real pleasure, the downside with real pleasure is that it requires effort. That is the payment that is made. Effort. Whereas in normal pleasures, nice meal out, new home, or whatever it is, the price that is paid comes afterwards in the disappointment. You thought this new home was going to change your world. Well, it doesn't. You're still the same, fucking screwed up, unhappy person inside. The new home maybe pleases you for, I don't know, a week or two, maybe longer than that, but sooner or later you realise you're the same person. But if you want to be a different person, you have to put effort in. Not that it's, we don't go chasing after being a different person, but understanding and knowledge, which is what you get through effort, does change, even though you're not seeking change. So there's a kind of practice that we can get involved in here, which is at any moment it's very easy to see what pleasures you're chasing, because we're always chasing pleasure of some kind. The pleasure is either active or passive. For most people it's passive. Oh, I'm going to go out today for lunch, or oh, I'm going to meet so-and-so. It's always stuff that involves some external agent, some external thing. And we can look at our chasing after the various pleasures. Social, material, fame or notoriety. Fame's generally reserved for movie stars and so on, but maybe we're after some kind of notoriety, some external approval, whatever it is. So it may be anticipation of a delicious meal, a new sexual partner, a promotion, some external recognition or validation. 101 things, and they'll be yours will be particular to you. So once we're engaged in this with the new sexual partner, eating a meal, whatever it is, we should just remember, it doesn't mean we spoil our enjoyment. We just remember, this is the upside of the roller coaster. Afterwards will come the downside. This is the price I pay. And when the downside comes, you'll have some understanding of it, which actually diminishes the pain associated with it. And the beauty of this is that if you do that, you are both being passive and active at the same time. So the passivity is, I'm eating my favourite kind of steak or something, gives me pleasure. That's the passivity. The activity is, I'm eating my favourite steak, this is the upside of the roller coaster, and the downside will follow. In other words, making the effort to understand the process that's taking place. So from such observation comes understanding, and this understanding is a pleasure with no downside. There you go, something without a downside, because you've already paid the price through the effort that you've made. You can transform your life with this, but it requires effort. Whether you do it or not, of course, is up to you.